to the official podcast of FCS Fans Nation with your hosts Kylor Neal, Matthew Frazee, and Jamie Williams.
FCS Fans Nation. It was a spooky weekend, and it wasn't just because of Halloween. It was because of upsets and continued chaos. I feel like I'm on repeat mode with the chaos that the FCS keeps bringing us, but it just makes it more fun. Not as fun, though, as the OG crew together again tonight. Mr. Kylor Neal of Eagles Power Hour, our James Madison Stronghold, Mr. Jamie Williams, and your unbiased Bison admin, Matthew Frazee, welcoming you back to the FCS Fans Nation podcast. We apologize for the delay as you're waking up on Tuesday listening to this podcast. Of course, real life and Halloween got in the way a little bit. Before we jump into football, Mr. Neal, how was your Halloween night? Did you shut off the lights and keep kids away, or were you tossing out candy left and right?
We were trying to toss out candy and trying to be good neighbors, but the thing that we realized, we have a motion sensor light. So halfway through the night, we're like, dude, we're not having any kids this year. And then we kind of went up and went, oh, yeah, it's because all of our lights are off outside. So it looks like we are not participating because to come into our house, there's a little walkway down a little like hallway, too, to get to our front door. Everything's off. So bought a lot of candy. And unfortunately, this fat boy gets to eat now.
Yeah, you can save it for dessert all the way through November as we work our way towards Thanksgiving and the FCS playoffs. On the topic of playoffs, guys, we have a bunch of great topics tonight. People are getting antsy, and the main topics within our Big 7 questions really revolve around that playoff time frame. So let's get right into them so we can get the folks exactly what they want, moving into the peak weeks before Selection Sunday.
The top 7 FCS topics of the week. This is the Big 7.
All right, Jamie and Kylor, let's kick it off right away. This is a phenomenal question from Mr. Case Han. We also just had a post on our page about this. It was a great question from a fan that we had about trying to combat the strength of schedule of Sam Houston. Case writes here, if Sam Houston beats Dixie State, will y'all, hopefully I did that right up here, up north, finally give them some credit for strength of schedule? Okay, guys, Bearcats remaining undefeated, looking like a top 2 seed, but the strength of schedule keeps coming into question. Mr. Williams, do you have some thoughts here on Sam Houston? Are you willing to just give him a pass, or are we going to go off Massey ratings and such?
I mean, he asked about strength of schedule. I mean, Dixie State gets tons of credit. They're playing a really difficult schedule. Unfortunately, they haven't beaten anybody. But yeah, that's a great schedule. Dixie State should get tons of credit for playing a tough schedule coming in. You know, their first full fall. That's probably not what he was asking. So Sam's not going to have a good strength of schedule, but Sam's also beating people by 23 points a game, which is what you would expect a top 2-3 team in the country to do against the schedule they have. So they're doing exactly what they should do. So if things hold up and they continue to remain unbeaten, then they'll go ahead and get a top 2 seed.
Strength of schedule itself, I love the argument that the Rev has made in the past. Like, you cannot, as a Sam Houston fan, complain about strength of schedule and seeding when it benefited you in the spring, and however, it's going to be a negative to you in the fall. But kind of like we've talked previously on the podcast, the chaos that is occurring within the FCS is giving the committee plenty of reason to just say, well, Sam Houston is the only consistent here. They're strong. The quality wins they did have on a weaker strength of schedule, still, they blew these teams out or they played them really competitively. It is becoming increasingly difficult, regardless of strength of schedule, to not have Sam Houston at the top 2 because the others keep eating each other alive. We're going to get some more answers on that with like NDSU and SDSU playing this week and a few other top matchups, Montana State, Eastern Washington. But really, are we going to give them credit for strength of schedule, or are we going to rely on this is the team we know, Kylor?
I mean, I think we can do a little bit of both, right? I think you do have to when you're doing seeding, playoff seedings, I've mentioned this so many times. I don't think it's just hey, who's the best team? I think you need to reward teams who maybe have had a tougher road and stayed undefeated. The good news, like you just mentioned, there's been a little bit of chaos at the top. There's only really 2 more teams maybe Sam Houston needs to worry about if they win out who can potentially get a seat above them. You're looking at Montana State. They have their tough stretch going on now. They play Eastern Washington. That'd be a huge win if they can get past that. Then they have Montana at the end of the year. They can go 10-1 versus or 10-0 versus the FCS and have a much stronger strength of schedule by the end of the season, because Sam Houston sits at 60th right now. This does not help that strength of schedule, man. And Sam Houston really needs to beat Dixie State by like 50, 60 points, because right now you look at this. South Dakota State 55-7 against Dixie. UC Davis, who, yes, they're in the top 10, but they also lost to Idaho State. They beat Dixie State 60-27. Weber State 41-3. Like right now, Sam Houston, you deserve the number 1 or NDSU. I think those are the 2 easiest options. But yeah, if you beat Dixie State by 60, I think that helps. If you beat them by 20, probably doesn't look that strong. So we'll see what they do. But yeah, let's give Dixie a little bit of credit and not Sam Houston here. What a hell of a first-year schedule for the FCS. I mean, when you look at their schedule, Sac State, Weber State, UC Davis, South Dakota State, Montana, Stephen F. Austin, Delaware, Sam Houston, Missouri State. What a hell of a schedule to go into the first year of the FCS. But I know this question was a little bit of like trolling for us to give Sam Houston some love. We do like the question. But yeah, you got to win by like 50, 60.
But you got to give them a little bit. I mean, if I'm going to do a little bit of counter, I'll hook you up case here. And I understand you're looking at the Massey strength of schedule right now from Sam Herder, and South Dakota State is 23rd. I get that. They're playing tougher competition than Sam Houston. If you put them on each other's schedules, things would look different. But if you looked at just ranked wins, I mean, Jacksonville State at the time was a ranked win for Sam Houston. It doesn't look good now. UCA was, but Eastern Kentucky is number 25 in the stats poll right now. They'll play Sam Houston in 2 weeks. So like, Sam Houston can't control that, but when they are facing these ranked teams, they are beating them, even though they're more on the bottom tier in comparison to SIU and others. So for a Sam Houston fan who really doesn't give 2 craps about the Missouri Valley or the CAA or other teams, because they're thinking, well, you guys haven't even been competitive with us when we faced you. Like, it's NDSU, and then what have you done? What have the rest of you done to us? Not much, right? So I can see where the strength of schedule gets annoying for them, especially when you look at this list right here. Montana State, 64th strength of schedule. James Madison, 52nd. UC Davis, 54th. Sam Houston, 60. That's within a 10-team range right there. So you can go with like the big 3 or whatever you want, but Sam Houston's an outlier. So you got to give him a little bit of credit.
But to counter, now after this Dixie State, Sam Houston's strength schedule is going to probably fall to 70th, and Montana's is going to jump up to like 35th, Montana State's, because of the strength of schedule towards the end of the season. Like you said, Sam Houston they're going to face one team who's a potential playoff team right now in their whole schedule. That's Eastern Kentucky. Now, Sam Houston shits on them. Who knows if Eastern Kentucky becomes a playoff team? Right now, it looks like they're on the bubble looking inward, and I would put them in the playoff contention right now. And again, it's not Sam Houston's fault that the schedule turned out to be like this. The out-of-conference is made back in a while ago. I still think it kind of hurts them a little bit. Maybe they should have played 11 games just to really solidify. If there's a lot of 10-1 teams and a lot of them have ranked wins, and Sam Houston's best win is a bubble team or a non-playoff team in Central Arkansas, because it looks like they are on the outside looking in with they are still a D2 team left on their schedule. I mean, it's kind of one of those things. Sam Houston's doing what they're supposed to do. I don't think anyone's going to say, at least anyone who pays attention to the FCS is not going to say that Sam Houston is not one of the favorites to win the FCS title. But at the same time, like Dustin said, like I've said in the past, you can't get mad when the resume helps you to get home field advantage and then get pissed when the resume doesn't. So, I mean, again, Sam Houston just needs to keep rooting for other teams to lose. If Montana State loses this weekend or sometime throughout the process, it looks like Sam Houston's going to be a lock for that 2 seed. But, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, there's going to be 2 big games for Sam Houston fans, and we're going to get into one of those right now. But, yeah, they would love for Montana State to lose, and they would love for the Bison to go down in the big matchup this week. So that would hook them up immensely for sure. So moving forward here, unless Jamie, if you have any final thoughts, my man.
I just want to say I hope Clayton Holland is happy. We just spent the last 10 minutes talking about it's Sam Houston State, so I hope he's happy now.
Yeah, there you go. Got to have the proper pronunciation in there. All right, guys, moving on to team. I'm kind of going to mix questions here a little bit. We have Jeremiah Rash, our awesome SIU fan. Even in a loss, comes on the page, interacts. Great guy. He says Northern Iowa with 2 huge statement wins in a row, defeating South Dakota State and SIU. How good is that defense? And does this show just how good the Bison are? So kind of a 2-part question. What are you guys feeling about UNI? And I would like this to kind of roll a little bit into North Dakota State and how are we feeling about them with South Dakota State. So we were messaging a little bit back and forth about UNI. What are we thinking in terms of their ranking, Jamie, as your stats top 25 voter, and then moving forward towards a playoff competition here?
I think for being a team with 3 losses, 2 against the FCS, they're kind of forgotten a little bit when you talk about the top teams because beginning of the season, their profile's a little down. But they've beaten a lot of good teams throughout the year. They've already beaten South Dakota State. Unfortunately, they lost to South Dakota, which knocked them back down. They did lose to the Bison. They beat Southern Illinois. They beat Sacramento State by 18 points, and Sacramento State looks like they got a chance to go 8-0 in the Big Sky.
Yep.
So their final 3 games are Illinois State, Missouri State, and Western Illinois. Now, Missouri State is on the road, but would anybody be surprised if they win all 3? Because I wouldn't. And I think if they do, they're a seeded team, I think. Especially if North Dakota State does win the marker, because that would make just their profile even, ahead of South Dakota State, who people probably have close together, even though Northern Iowa did win that game. So I think Northern Iowa is one of those sneaky teams that you really got to watch out for, and they're not going to be somebody that you want your team to be playing when the playoffs roll around. And again, the fact to answer the second part, North Dakota State scored 34 points on them, and that defense has really been locking people down. So with that and the way the Bison's defense is playing, I really feel like it does enhance the whole profile of North Dakota State, and but it also shows how good Northern Iowa is too.
Yeah, UNI best kind of offensive output I've seen from them. Really stud Weston wide receiver they've got. That transfer running back and their transfer quarterback are playing both well. So UNI's offense shouldn't be downplayed like it has in the past. So UNI for sure is not a team. If you're an auto bid, I'm telling you, this is not Missouri Valley bias. You do not want to play them. And that's been UNI's MO anyways, is to just end up in the playoffs, make it at least to the quarters, and then they typically lose at that time. But boy, if you're a seeded team and UNI is going to come in there, that's going to be scary. And the proof is in the pudding based off of what they're doing right now. On the North Dakota State thing, I really feel like with the Bison, it's within the fan base, but it's in the FCS community as well. This sounds lame, but it sounds like you're like, okay, whatever, Matt. But I really feel like NDSU is not going to get its true due unless it beats South Dakota State. Even with SDSU at 2 losses, even with NDSU being higher ranked and being undefeated and how good they've looked, I really feel like people are holding on. Like, great, you beat UNI at home. Great, you went and beat UND. But go win that marker game, and then the FCS collectively will go, oh, crap. Okay, top 2 seed. It's all going through Fargo. But I think everyone's just holding on to see what happens at South Dakota State with that rivalry, which is a still good team with the Bunnies. So,
and I think the reason for that is people are still likening the offense to what they saw in the spring and the lack of quarterback play, and they didn't see the great play from Quincy early in the year. Cam's provided a spark, but people want to see that kind of continue for more than a game and a half. And then if you do it against your biggest rival, I think your point's well founded. I don't think you're crazy by that thought process at all.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who trots out there, of course, and between Cam and Quincy, it almost feels like it's the spring again. However, it does feel like the talent has been elevated right there. So it'll be interesting to see how that game plays out. I'm not going to give my thoughts as I'm going to join the Jackrabbit Illustrated podcast for NDSU SDSU. So make sure you guys subscribe to us at the FCS Fans Nation Network on YouTube so you can live stream that Jackrabbit Illustrated as they are part of our network. I'll be joining them this week for some fun talk with Thumper and the boys. So, Kylor, final kind of thoughts from you here on UNI, and if that changes your mind about NDSU at all.
No, I don't think how UNI is playing really changes my mind about anything. Historically, UNI has been a really tough team. They've had a really aggressive defense. Their offense, some years are pretty decent, some years total trash. Right there's this year is actually kind of in the middle of both. They're not as bad as they are in 2019, but how you guys are talking, it seems like you're making it seem like UNI has totally found their offense. They're still in the bottom half of quarterback play. They're still in the bottom half of, or like right in the middle tier of scoring offense. They're right up there with Idaho, the powerhouse of Idaho for the offensive type of situations. So I mean, when you're looking at it, UNI is a dangerous team who's going to play everyone tough. But I still think that UNI is one of those teams, they're going to play almost to the strength of a team that they're playing against. They're one of those teams who can beat anyone in the top 25 any given day. And I think they're one of those teams who will lose to anyone in the top 25 any given day. They're looking like they're peaking at the right time, where it seems like maybe in previous seasons they've peaked at a different portion of the season. It's kind of all depends on how well you're playing towards the end of the year. And UNI is looking really good in the second half of the season. So that's going to help them get into the playoff. I think they do probably win out the next 3 games. So, I mean, UNI is always a dangerous team. They're better than they were offensively in the spring. Defense is always good, but UNI to me is just Weber. If you look at it, defensively, they're right around the same. Offensively, they're right around the same. They're Weber who's healthy. And we saw what Weber, who's healthy, could do to Montana State and Eastern Washington. It's a different team with, not a third-string quarterback playing. So I think UNI is a very dangerous team. They're always good. Maybe they're just not as bad offensively as they have been in the spring or 2019, but they are as good as they have been the rest of the decade, which is still a really good team.
One thing I would like to see, and I know it's too hard to kind of pull that out, is where would they rank just if you took the average yardage and all that once Theo Day became the quarterback over the last few weeks? I don't know. Maybe they would still be around the same spot, but it seems like that he's elevated that offense to another level that they weren't at under McElvain. And, maybe I wound up being completely incorrect, but it's just kind of what it seems from the outside.
I mean, they haven't put up over 30 points since the switch. If that proves anything, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it just
maybe
seems
against
like they've
Youngstown
got more.
State, but
Yeah, it just seems like they get more dynamic playmakers, if you will. So they've always had like one guy, but a good tall, big receivers, really shifty running back. So we'll see how it plays out. I think against it'll be a difference between the top tiers when they face them in the quarters to semis and what they see out of an auto bid in round 1, right?
I think, is it safe to also say this? There's a few teams you don't consider to be top tier, but there's also a few teams you never want to play.
100%.
UNI always seems to be one of those teams. If you get them in the playoffs, you're like, even if they're like ranked like the last 4 in, where that should be an easy matchup, you always look at UNI and you're like, crap. I mean, this is going to be a dogfight. It doesn't matter if you're the number 1 team in the nation and they're a 5-loss team. You're always going to be in a dogfight. That's UNI in a nutshell.
Yep, absolutely. They are a team you do not want to see in the playoffs, and that is a giveaway to our final Big 7 question, but that's okay. We'll come back to it, of course. All right, guys, moving forward here, have an outstanding question from Mr. Hall Jones and our good man, Anthony B-Man. Anthony B-Man starts with the CAA got more jumbled from yesterday's results. Who do you see making the playoffs in the CAA? And is James Madison back in that conversation for a top 2 seed? Kylor, I hate to keep ignoring you off the bat, man, but we've got a stats top 25 voter and a Duke. I feel like we just have to start with Jamie again on this one, my man. The CAA standings popping up here on YouTube, guys, if you're watching. And what do you think, Jamie? What's going on with the CAA?
Well,
what's going on?
Yeah, I kind of feel like the CAA is going to wind up as a 3-bid conference, and because I don't see anybody else coming up from towards the middle or the bottom that's going to take a 4th bid at this point. Maybe if Elon or Rhode Island wins out, but I think Villanova, James Madison, and William & Mary are pretty solid for the playoffs as long as William & Mary doesn't trip up against Delaware or Richmond. And, of course, if they beat James Madison, they pretty much lock themselves in. And as long as Villanova runs the table, which they probably should, obviously they're going to win the conference potentially as long as, I mean, if JMU beats William & Mary, then they would. If William & Mary beats James Madison, then William & Mary will have that inside track. So I think those are kind of your three teams that could and will be at the playoff bracket when it comes out right after the season. To the second part, can JMU get back in the top 2 seed territory? Yes, they've got to win out, but that won't do it alone. They're going to need South Dakota State to win the marker, and they'll need Eastern Washington and Montana State both to lose, because if Eastern Washington wins out, they'll jump over JMU and would get that potential second top 2 seed. If Montana State wins, they would still need to lose the brawl to maybe get in there. So it's jumbled. It's going to be, I think it's a long putt for JMU to get a top 2 seed, but 3 or 4 sounds pretty reasonable with an outside shot at the number 2, unless complete chaos hits.
Yeah, if you're not a Bison fan, you cheer for South Dakota State this weekend. You 100% want NDSU to lose. As Kylor would say, you should do that anyways, because the Bison deserve nothing. They've had too much success. I'm not going to cheer for them. So honestly, that's how you should do it. But for this weekend specifically, man, if NDSU comes away with the win, Sam Houston's likely not going to lose. Your top 2 seeds are gone. So James Madison's chances are null and void. However, I hate to curve this back into NDSU because we're on CAA talk, but if NDSU loses, if they finish out undefeated after that, and so does SIU, they'll share the Missouri Valley title, and you'll have a 10-1 shared Missouri Valley title team with a, let's just say, close loss to South Dakota State, who could be a seed as well. I mean, that's still in top 4 territory. And then if you compared them to James Madison, who has 1 FCS loss, to Villanova, whose loss is worse, because Villanova's going to have 2 losses, South Dakota State. It's going to get completely chaotic. And if Montana State beats Eastern, good luck, because then they could just be the top 2 seed. So I kind of avoided the CAA talk because, Jamie, I think you did it really well. That top 2 seed talk, though, gets very, very interesting, especially from out in Kylor Neal's Big Sky country, which has teams that are going to be fighting for it, man. What do you think, Kylor? This is all just getting chaotic. It's like all that candy in the Halloween bucket, man. It's thrown together. We don't know what to do with it. What do we do, dude? What do we do?
Yeah, I think JMU is they're one of those guys who wants to pass out candy to the trick-or-treaters, but they have a motion light outside. I just don't see James Madison having a possible real road to a 2 seed right now. I think, like Jamie said, there has to be chaos, but I think it has to be a lot of chaos. And I think the FCS has already hit its limit on chaos that's going to happen this year. Because like Jamie was just saying, this Montana State versus Eastern Washington game is massive. And whoever wins most likely wins out the rest of the season too. And I think both of them, when you're looking at pure resume, would jump James Madison for an actual seed. NDSU, I just don't think they're going to lose. They look too damn good right now. Southern Illinois, they may have taken their last loss, but I think James Madison jumps them now. Sam Houston, they're going to win out. I have a hard time seeing James Madison get a top 2 seed right now. I think their best bet, like Jamie said, is at 3 to 4. And that's really realistic to have that 3 to 4. But, the CAA looks like it's beating itself up. It looks like they could potentially be a 3 bid conference, but Maine is starting to turn it around. Okay. You look at Maine right there, 4-4. We have historically seen 7-4 teams from the Big Sky, Missouri Valley, and CAA get in. Maine, if they win out, because also I think they have a really bad FBS team on the schedule in UMass. I think that's what it is. So, I mean, they have a potential chance to just beat UMass. I mean, I think anyone has a good chance to beat UMass if you're a top 25 caliber team. And how Maine's playing the last 2 weeks, they look like they have a shot. William & Mary's playing well. Villanova, I don't think they lose anymore. James Madison doesn't probably lose anymore. So I think you're looking at 3 minimum, but I still think there's going to potentially be a 4th team out of the CAA. As long as the teams do what they're supposed to, but who knows? It is the CAA. They're looking every year a little bit more like the SoCon, where it's just an absolute battle in conference play, which does eliminate playoff bids. I mean, it just does.
Well, and the other thing about James Madison, I'll go a little homer here just for a second, is when you look at the loss, it's to Villanova, but it's by 1 point. So it's not like they got, beat by even a field goal. We missed 2 field goals that could have won the game. So the loss, when you really look at what the loss is, it's by 1 point. And sure, of course, it should ding us because it's not a win on the resume, but it's also not a bad loss when it's probably going to be a top 10 to a top 10. If they could beat William and Mary, that's another potential ranked win. Weber State should remain ranked. And if Maine wins out, that's another ranked win. So the resume actually looks like it could be looking better. But again, I still stand by what I said, that 3-4 seems more likely with an outside shot at 2. But the resume is going to look a lot better potentially than it was than we thought it was when we were talking about this even 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, the William and Mary thing is kind of the shocker that changes a little bit of perception. If James Madison can go in there and beat William and Mary, which I think all of us are going to probably bet on James Madison then in that game, that definitely helps the resume. The only difference is you're going to probably have 4 or 5 teams with the same amount of losses that have top 10 wins over James Madison's top 10 loss, if that makes sense. But I mean, James Madison's resume is not going to be bad at the end of the year. It's just probably not a 2-seed caliber resume.
It will be very, very interesting. All those Chad and the Sam Houston fans listening right now are going, yeah, listen to these chumps justifying their seeds with a loss. And they're like, God, you just tear us apart on our strength of schedule. Yeah, that's too good. Too good.
And all of them will have 10 wins.
That's true. There you go. Committee talk. All right, moving on, guys. Good stuff. We're sticking with the playoffs. People are getting antsy, so let's just stick with it. And our main man, Danny Johnson, outstanding CLA fan, outstanding member of our FCS Fans Nation page on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Shameless plug. His question here, guys, is all about CLA, which is his main team. And he wants to know, what are CLA's chances for a deep playoff run? And to read his entire quote here for you, they had a weird win against McNeese this last week, winning 23-20. He wants to give the Cowboys some credit for keeping that game actually really close. But if the Lions keep winning going the rest of the way they are, what are the chances they go deep in the playoffs with an improving defense? And even in a week where we didn't see them score 50, which is pretty common with Cole Kelly. So what do you guys think? Is CLA a type of team that you're going to worry about and fear in the playoffs? Or are you viewing them more like how Sam Houston was in that 3-4 year period where they'd come in with this elite Jeremiah Briscoe offense and then they'd hit a tough defense and you just would see it inevitably fail? Or is this team better than we realize? Kylor, what do you think about CLA's chances? Would you fear them in a playoff matchup?
Yes and no. I mean, I really think for CLA or SLU, whatever you want to call them, I forgot what they wanted to change their name to. But Danny Johnson, love you. But I mean, Southeast Louisiana, here's the thing about them. They are a very, very good offensive team with a 6'7" NFL talented quarterback. I mean, the Walter Payton Award winner, you're always going to give them a chance. But I really think it just depends on matchups. You said, do I fear them? I probably don't, because I just don't think they keep up with us offensively, even though that sounds weird to say when, Cole Kelly's offense is number 2 in the nation or something. I just think Eastern Washington's defense is better than Southeastern Louisiana's. So I think in a style matchup, it depends on who Southeastern Louisiana plays. And I think if they win out and get like a top 5 seed, which could potentially happen, that's going to really help their chances in the playoffs. But ultimately, I think quarterfinals is a ceiling for them. And I don't want to sound like I'm being a little bit of a narcissist because it's almost a similar style of team as my team. I just think overall, not playing any real good competition throughout the whole year. I mean, we're going to actually see that this weekend. They're going to play Incarnate Word, who is a good team. They are a playoff caliber team. If they just completely blow out Incarnate Word, yeah, maybe CLA's chances are a little bit better for a deep run. But right now, I think the quarterfinals is just the maximum limit that I have them going. But it really depends on the playoff seeding. What are the matchups and all of that?
Do you think that you would view them differently if it's not a 45-42 loss to Louisiana Tech? CUSA team, not great, but like if they were undefeated with the FBS win, are you viewing them any differently? Or do you think style-wise and matchup-wise, which is really big what you and Jamie hit all the time, is that more what you're relying on in comparison to
I
like
mean,
if they had an FBS win on the schedule? Would you view them better? Is it that simple?
no, because here's also my thought process. You look at the McNeese games. Now, I get it, it's an in-state rivalry. McNeese is also the second worst passing defense in the nation. When Eastern Washington struggled throwing the ball, it was against Weber State, who was the number 3 passing defense in the nation at the time, and we still threw numbers that no one else has thrown against Weber State. The difference is McNeese is not Weber State. They were the second worst passing defense in the nation, and they were still giving trouble both games they played them. I mean, you can look at it either way. That in-state rivalry, I mean, that always does change things. But when you're competitive with that type of a passing defense, I think you can at least have question marks on how are they going to fare when they play someone who has a top 20 passing defense, because they haven't played anyone like that right now. One of their best passing defenses they played is really Northwestern State. I mean, does that prove too much? Or it's North Alabama. I mean, how many wins do they have this season? 0. I mean, this is the kind of thing where, do you think they're going to be able to throw the ball that many times against South Dakota State or a UNI? I think they're really going to struggle more so than an Eastern Washington would.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how CLA plays out and all that. Jamie, we kind of got to move on to another topic, but I'll give you one last little minute here in terms of CLA and your thoughts on the deep runs from a team that you have very based in defensive strength.
Yeah, and I don't need even the full minute because Kylor basically said just about everything I was going to say. And it's very matchup dependent, but I just don't see a team like that slinging around. I guess we got to call them soft East Louisiana. I don't know, because they're just going to sling it around the yard. And I know the defense is improving there, but it's not about their defense as much as it is to me about the defense that they'll be playing against, whoever that is. And if they have a scheme that can bottle up Cole at all, long day for them. And McNeese almost made them pay. And like Kylor said, they're not a great passing defense, but they're probably the best defense in the Southland. So could they do it? Yeah, but I don't see a real high ceiling for them when they go against those real strong teams that they're going to have to see in the playoffs.
I can see them. I would say matchups are big and just on repeat mode here, but give them Delaware's path in the spring. I forget who Delaware played round 1, but I know it was like an auto bid, easy game. And then they went to Jacksonville State, who people have questions about. Now, once they hit South Dakota State, bam, that's the big killer, and they got destroyed. I could see that. I'm not saying they're going to get blown out, but I could see them getting enough getting a seed, avoiding the first round, winning an easier second round game, having a good matchup in the quarters. But in the semis, we've seen it so many times. That's when big teams are there, and you're going to have to perform. So
can we all just say we really want to see Southeastern Louisiana come to Cheney this year in the
Oh,
playoffs?
absolutely.
I think that is the game to watch in the postseason if it happens. That's like the one I'm wishing for. Eric Berrier versus Cole Kelly, who are both having phenomenal years.
Yeah.
That is the game the committee needs to make. If they are being biased on anything, put those two on the same bracket. I don't care. Make
Just
Eastern
do it.
Washington down a seed. Just do it. That's the
Just
game
do
everyone
it.
wants to see.
Yeah. I'm down for it. We want to see it on live TV. And shout out to you, Danny. We know you're a great fan on the page, so we don't mean to downplay your Lions at all. Amazing year. We hope things keep going well for you guys, which is good. All right, guys. This is really great here from Mr. Scott Moody. He wants to know what games are basically elimination games for the playoffs this upcoming week. Kind of an in-depth question a little bit. I did a little bit of research, so on occasion I take these questions first. I'd love to go right off the bat if you don't mind. I looked at a few. One of mine was VMI against ETSU, and I'm seeing some head nods, so maybe I stole these from you guys. But while that's not a true playoff eliminator, ETSU still has to play Mercer, and VMI has to play Furman. It's all based on how many bids you're going to see out of that conference. So this matchup could determine who's in, who's out. I think if ETSU loses, they both can still get in because ETSU has beat Vanderbilt an SEC win. So with 2 losses, they could still see the playoff field. So maybe not a true eliminator, but you're going to go from this team's in, most likely into, this team now is fringe bubble. One of the one I'm really excited about, because we had a question on it last week, is the Pioneer League guys. I said the chaos was going to happen this week, and it's about to happen. Davidson plays St. Thomas, and Morehead State plays San Diego. Well, Davidson is 5-0 in conference play, and those other 3 teams I just mentioned have 1 loss. And all 4 of them, matchup, they're playing against each other. So the remaining weeks for them are super easy. So outside of a crazy upset by Stetson or something, really, if Davidson can pull this off, they should be able to hold on to the Pioneer League, which it's a 1-bid league, and you could see 3 eliminations. You could see St. Thomas, Morehead, and San Diego all go poof, just because Davidson wins this week and finishes an easy schedule. So I would say for Pioneer, this might be the week where we figure out the auto bid unless chaos happens. So, Jamie, I saw your head nod, so I may have stole one from you, my man, but do you have a few others that are eliminator games this week?
Yeah, you took, but I think that was a good one to call out, and I think you're dead on, because if ETSU loses that game, they still got a shot. If VMI loses that game, it might be almost curtains for them, because Mercer and Chattanooga are also 1-loss teams in that conference, and I know a lot of those teams still have to play each other, but I think you're looking at a 3-bid Southern Conference team conference this year, and you don't want to be one of those teams with 2 losses, and you certainly don't want to for the third. So I think you nailed that one. The other one I kind of looked at as a potential is Eastern Kentucky and Stephen F. Austin. Whoever loses that game is definitely out, but the winner is still alive. I think Eastern Kentucky's more alive right now than Stephen F. Austin, and they still do have Sam Houston. But if you look at our buddy the Revs SFA, they have this game against Eastern Kentucky. Then they have Central Arkansas, which, if they can win that on the road on the Stripes, is not a bad win. And then they end with Lamar, something they should win. So they could at least give the committee something to think about if they win out. If Eastern Kentucky wins out, especially with a win over Sam Houston, I think they're in. But they can't lose to anybody other than Sam Houston and still be on the bubble. So I think this one's kind of one of those quintessential eliminator games. Kylor, I don't know what you've got.
I'm going to just talk about the game I was just talking about. I think SLU versus Incarnate Word is kind of the playoff hopes are on the line. And it's unfortunate because both teams are actually playing pretty good. But when you look at Incarnate Word's resume, they're 6-2. Yes, they have an FBS loss. Actually, I think they have an FBS win, right? Something like that. Yeah, they beat
Texas State.
Texas. Okay, Texas State. So they lost to McNeese, and then they lost to Youngstown State, which is kind of a bad win. But they're still in control if they can potentially beat, SLU. They can win that auto bid because they'll have the head-to-head. And then the rest of their schedule is pretty favorable. Nichols, who's kind of in a down year, and then, Houston Baptist. But if SLU wins, which I think they will, well, then Incarnate Word, the Southland, you're probably only getting 1 bid. So I think this game definitely has a lot on the line for playoffs. I mean, if Incarnate Word wins, Southland's probably getting 2 teams in the playoffs, which is awesome. I mean, I would like to see more conferences get more than 1 bid in there, but you got to kind of earn it when you're in those situations, and you can't lose to Youngstown State and think you're going to get an at-large. But if you win the conference, Southeastern Louisiana, they've done a good job for the rest of their schedule. They will deserve an at-large. So I think that's pretty exciting, and I think it is a playoff eliminator for one of the teams, but it can also eliminate someone's outside chances of getting in the playoffs also. So if you're a bubble team, like a Weber State or like half of the CAA or half of the Missouri Valley, or maybe that second team in the AQ7, that Eastern Kentucky game, you're rooting for Southeastern Louisiana to do business because you do not want Incarnate Word taking one of those spots away from you.
And you know who's rooting for all of those bubble teams to lose and all the other favorites to win? The second place teams. And I know they're picking up some momentum, but if Florida A&M wins out, they're still not going to win their division of the SWAC. But that's a pretty solid resume if you look at what they will wind up doing, because their loss is going to be to Jackson State by a couple points. So who's ranked, and other than that, I mean, I know there's no great wins on that schedule, but it would be hard to deny them a bid, especially if a little bit of chaos happens and they
I'd want
went
the
out.
Rattlers in. I want them in.
Marching 100. All
Yeah,
for you,
let's
Kylor.
go.
Yeah, I hate the animal, but I love the team, and I actually love the colors. D-Law and I have always battled on that. He's like, "Oh, worst uniforms ever." I'm like, "I love it, the orange and green." But no snakes, man, no snakes. Few of the last ones here for you, Scott, that I looked up. I would say USD, South Dakota. They're 5-3. They're at Western Illinois, who's 2-7. Now, Western Illinois is 2-7, but they just score a ton of points, and they've given a bunch of teams heart attacks this year. So South Dakota, when you look at the Missouri Valley, you have North Dakota State, Southern Illinois, Missouri State, Northern Iowa, South Dakota State, USD, all fighting for playoff hopes. Most people will pick South Dakota State to beat USD when they go up there. So if they can win this one, they'd be 6-3, take a fourth loss, not so bad. Last two real quickly. How about semifinalists in the spring, guys? Delaware. They're 4-4. They're going to 6-2 William and Mary. They have an FBS loss. They still play Villanova, Delaware, Richmond. So if Delaware wins out, they could be 7-3 in the committee's eyes with an FBS loss, and a few upsets there right at the end, and that could propel them in. I'm not going to predict it to happen, so I would say this is a complete eliminator for Delaware if they lose. And the final one here, it's in 2 weeks from now, but Fordham will play Holy Cross. They're both 3-0 in the Patriot. The winner of their matchup likely gets that auto bid unless we see a little bit of one-loss chaos. So there you go. There's a few options for you, Scott. So there will be a lot. If you're watching ESPN Plus, put up 4 different screens, my man. There's going to be a lot of fun games coming up here. So, all right, guys, one of our best here, Jacob Martinez, hooty hoo, Kennesaw State fan. He wants to know, where do all the at-larges go with all of this chaos? He says, what the heck? I'm looking at all this stuff, the CAA, the AQ7, Big South, SoCon. I'm just trying to figure out the at-larges. Where do they go? So let's break it down a little bit, guys. Of course, if you're listening right now, make sure you tune in. We are going to do our if you love NFL mock drafts, we mock the playoff field the week before, and it's a really fun event where we predict the final week games, put the bracket together. So make sure you're subscribed to our podcast here on any platform to catch that. But guys, looking at it right now, if you just had to go with some guesses, where are these at-larges coming from? Kylor, give me your thoughts on kind of first the big three and then where it goes from there.
I mean, if everything plays out the way it's supposed to, which that doesn't happen throughout the FCS season, so take this with a grain of salt. There's potentially 5 Big Sky teams that are going to have 8+ wins. I mean, that's pretty ridiculous. They have a real shot, and people are going to laugh at me for saying this. They have a real shot to get 4 at-larges. They just do this year. They have a shot to get 5, but I think more chaos needs to happen. But they have a realistic shot, if everything happens the way it should, to get 5 total bids, 4 at-larges. I think the same thing happens with the Valley. So now you're looking at 8 of the total 12 at-larges. CA probably gets 2 to 3. Now you're looking at 9 or 10, maybe 11. So it's almost what's going to happen with that Incarnate Word Southeastern Louisiana game. What's going to happen with Florida A&M? What's going to happen with maybe that Kennesaw Monmouth game? If Monmouth wins that game, Kennesaw maybe gets an at-large. I think there's only a few at-larges left who has a realistic shot to make it outside of those big 3 conferences. EKU, then you have a Kennesaw if they lose, but I don't think they're going to lose. And then you're probably looking like at an Incarnate Word if they can win, or a Florida A&M. But I think I'm going to say 11 of the at-larges right now are probably going to go, or 10 to 11 of them are probably going to go to the CA, Big Sky, and Missouri Valley.
Man, overwhelming this year, maybe from the big 3. Kylor, Tim Rask actually has a question. It was for the quick hits, but I'm going to throw it to you right now. So Tim Rask, thank you for asking this. He wanted to know the final records of Big Sky teams, which may be a little too much to dive into, but we will answer this question. He wants to know how many teams are in the playoffs in the Big Sky. So if you want to expand on your thought a little bit, you're thinking 5 is a possibility here?
I mean, if we're just going off of historic data, normally it's 7 wins is kind of the limit, where half of the Big Sky teams get in at 7 wins, half of them don't. There's a realistic chance Montana State is going to end with 9 to 10 wins. There's a realistic chance Sacramento State is going to end with 9 to 10 wins. There's a realistic chance Eastern Washington is going to end with 9 to 10 wins. There's a realistic chance UC Davis is going to end with 8 to 9 wins. Montana is going to probably end with 8 wins. Then you have Weber State, who's going to end with 7. There's a realistic chance that there's going to be 5 teams from the Big Sky who have 8 to 10 wins, which if you have 8 wins and you're in the Big Sky, every single time that's gotten you in the playoffs, I don't anticipate that changing this year.
Crazy. Oh man, it might be time for the Big Sky to get the "you got too many playoff teams" treatment that the Valley and CAA have got in the past. But of course, performance can change that, right? Jamie, do you kind of agree with these at-larges? You guys are much more of a better source with this than me. You guys are established voters. You're really diving into more of the specifics than this dumb host here. Do you kind of agree there with Kylor, or do you see some differences?
No, I think he's dead on. I think the Big Sky and the Valley are both a lock for 5 playoff teams. And of course, that includes their auto bid, so which is, like you said, 8 of those at larges right away. And then the CAA is going to take 2, it looks like. So there's 10. That leaves 2. So, and I was thinking the SoCon was going to get 3 teams. There might not be room. And like I said, if Kennesaw beats Monmouth, that's a 1-bid league. If Monmouth wins, it's got to be a 2-bid league because Kennesaw has played so well. I guess it doesn't have to be. Committee has, they've really paid attention to the resume, and they'll knock them for that Reinhardt game. They really will. And then the Incarnate Word and Southeast Louisiana, how does that play out? So you're going to have 8 to 12 teams hoping for 2 bids. Plus add in Weber, plus add in a potential Maine and a South Dakota, that are still fighting for those 2 bids. It's going to be coming down to the last results on the last day, and the committee's going to have a hard time figuring it out.
Yeah, I do not envy the committee at all. That is going to be a scary task as we're still on the fringe of Halloween here, going into Thanksgiving season. And speaking of scary things, guys, we're going to roll into our final question, already on the topic of playoffs and at-larges. So thank you, Jacob, with Mr. Jim Poppin asking, which teams scare you the most in the playoffs? This is a really, really good question because are you looking at an auto bid at all from a lower tier conference that might kick in? Are you fearful of the UNIs that you mentioned, Kylor? What team is going to, as you two both have top tier teams in the seeding department, who's going to come into your stadium and scare you a little bit, or where you got to travel to? What do you think, Kylor?
I mean, just historically, if we're only talking about my team, because I think that's kind of what you asked, right, Matt?
Yeah, a little bit. I guess, yeah. What would scare you? But on top of that, who do you think is a team where when you see them, you just go, "Oh, son of a gun"? Kind of like what you said with you and I prior to this.
I think the teams, so I'll answer both. I think the teams that scare me for a style matchup are going to be the North Dakota States, James Madisons, the South Dakota States of the world. I did leave off Sam Houston State. If you guys notice that, sorry, Sam Houston guys. Here's the thing. You guys always say defensive wins championships. You guys have one of the worst passing defenses in the nation. I think a style matchup, I'm pretty comfortable in that game with Eric Barrier throwing. We will see. You guys are a title contending team and one of the best out there. But your matchup doesn't scare me as much as someone who can stop the pass, which has been North Dakota State, a Weber, a James Madison, stuff like that. So I think those styles match up for more. But, I mean, it all depends on the bracket. I still think Sam Houston is one of the favorites to win it overall pending the matchups. But for an at-large, I don't see too many that scare me completely besides maybe like a Northern Iowa. They're just always a scary team who's going to play you tough.
Jamie, do you see any equivalent fears here? I guess for me, it's just really balanced because championship teams at the top level, if you have another balanced team coming in, you're trying to think of some sort of advantage. Like you and I in the past with a poor offense, you're like, well, they're just not going to score on us. We'll get up 20 points and the game will be over. Eastern, maybe with some weaker defenses in the past, you're just like, well, if you can just hold them to whatever, they can't keep up. But if you have more of that balance, which seems like a cop-out answer because it's so simple, but any team that's going to come in balanced or a team that is familiar with you are teams you should fear. So if C-Law plays Incarnate Word again, if James Madison has to play Villanova again, you don't want that repeat. I always say, I want the Missouri Valley to be strong enough to where it makes NDSU's resumes really good. But I don't want to see a lot of the teams in the playoffs because I don't want to play them again. I don't want to see a team that knows every single thing about us. I want new, fresh meat. So, Jim, I would just say if you're a fan for your team, don't cheer for conference teams to come play you again because that's where upsets happen because they already know who you are. So, Jamie, some final thoughts on scary teams as we are leaving Halloween.
I know that they kind of have taken the shine off of them with a couple of losses, but one that everybody should watch out for is once they are starting to get healthy, South Dakota State's going to be that balanced team, that aggressive defense, that strong offensive line, great run game, good, average, above average passing game that nobody's going to want to play. So you want me to pick one team, it's probably them. Counter to what you said, Matt, I would love to play Villanova again. We better not make that many mistakes again. I'd play them again in a heartbeat.
Yeah, as the losing team for sure. Like I've been saying this to Bison fans is before we hop into quick questions. I'm like, if we lose on Saturday, is it the worst scenario? Let's say we lose. Let's say we end up the 4 seed. So like you host all the way to the semis, and then they send you to Bowers Stadium in Sam Houston for a chance at a revenge game. Is that the worst case scenario in comparison to winning? And then in round 2, because of geography and bids, back here comes South Dakota State right back into the Fargo Dome. I don't know, man. I know it's easier to just say give me home field all the way to Frisco, but you're gonna see South Dakota State again if you win. So I think that's kind of interesting. But we don't need to dive in because we've got the border or the Dakota marker as the game of the week coming up here, guys. So let's get into some of these awesome quick hit questions, and then we'll roll in to see who will win that border battle.
Just because your question is answered quickly doesn't mean we don't care. These are the quick hit questions of the week.
All right, gentlemen, quick hit questions, rolling through these here. We got some good ones. Starting with Mr. Keo Wilson. He says we have 3 game balls to hand out for the best offense, best defense, and special teams. So who gets them and why? I will start with the special teams, actually, because they always get to go last. How about Weber State, right? Top 10 kickoff return team, statistically good field goal kicking, solid punter. And then, of course, the man, the myth, the legend. You saw him live, Jamie. Rashid Shaheed, 7th kickoff return for a touchdown last week, which is an FCS record, his 7th kickoff return in his career, which is very impressive. If I butchered his name, I apologize, but it's because I tried to read it and it was too fast, just like him running down the field. So kudos to them. The defense has still remained the same. It's got to be North Dakota State. They're actually giving up less points per game than since the beginning of their dynasty in 2011. It's ferocious. It's quick. It's athletic. The D-line is senior-ridden and big. So offensively, though, Kylor, I'll toss this to you, man. Selah, Eastern Washington, somebody else?
No, I mean, Eastern Washington deserves it as of right now. They even put up more points versus a top 3 passing defense than, Selah did versus a bottom 2 passing defense in the nation. So, I mean, special teams, I like what you just mentioned, though, because special teams is 100% what beat Eastern Washington in that Weber game. Their special teams coach was a beast with those 6 fake punts or whatever he did. It was only 3, but, if you say 6, it even sounds more sexy. No, I think all of those are probably the safe picks right now, for at least right now in the season.
Cool.
And when I researched it, I took it as who was he looking at for this week getting those game balls. So I'll just throw out some names of players for this past week.
Yeah.
On offense, Seth Morgan of VMI, 500 combined yards, 3 touchdowns. They came back from about, I think it was 18 to 21 points down in the middle of the third quarter to beat Sanford. On defense, I'm going to name Ayabi Anoma of UT Martin. Had a sack and a half, 4.5 tackles for loss, 8 total tackles, and blocked a field goal to preserve a 17-16 win for UT Martin to keep their record unblemished against the FCS. And then Rashid Shaheed, I always say if you break it, you get my player of the week. So I took that one in a different direction, but I wanted to throw those guys out there.
No, I'm glad you did, man. That's awesome. And kudos to those players and congrats to them. And those are some outstanding performances. You love to see it. So, Jamie, going right back at you, man. What chance does William and Mary in Eastern Kentucky have versus James Madison and Sam Houston in 2 weeks? Mr. Seth Meyer wants to know this. This would have big big seeding implications. Could you see an upset there at all, or do you kind of see it being a little bit of a mismatch regardless of ranking?
Eastern Kentucky, way outside shot. I don't see it. I mean, they'd have to have everything go right. William and Mary, it's a home game, James Madison. So I'd give them more than an outside shot. They have a very aggressive defense. They got a good front four, and their secondary are ball hawks. They have 8 interceptions in the last 2 games. I believe they have 3 pick sixes, so they turn you over. Now, it doesn't turn the ball over a lot. William & Mary also has the best rush offense in the CAA, so they will just want to pound the rock. They've got a strong, big offensive line. They're just big boys. I saw them in person a week ago. So they'll just rotate backs. The quarterback gets into it. So I'd give them a little bit more of a chance in Eastern Kentucky. Now, don't get me wrong. I still think JMU goes down there, wins that game, but they're not going to win that game as handily as our fan base probably would have thought a few weeks ago, as William & Mary has gotten a lot better. And I'm not surprised because Mike London is a heck of a coach, and he is a national championship coach. So not a surprise. I thought William & Mary might be a playoff team next year, but it looks like they are one this year.
We will see what happens, Seth. Could cause a little bit of chaos as we think we have it figured out, like always. This one's really interesting. Dustin Perman, you had 2 questions, I know, but one of your questions was, why is November 2nd to no practice day? I don't know this answer or if this is a thing. So, boys, am I off on this? Dustin,
Election day.
Is election day? Is that?
At least in my state, it is. We
Is
got
that,
a gubernatorial law. Maybe that has something to do with it.
maybe that does have something to do with it. Dustin, feel free to toss in the comments, man, on Facebook, Twitter, wherever for FCS Fans Nation. Let us know if this was kind of like a little jab or something, because I'm actually intrigued and interested. I Googled it, and I was like, November 2nd, like football, and I couldn't find anything. So we'll see. We'll see if it's election day or not. But thanks for making us think of it, Dustin. This is good, guys, because as of an hour and a half ago, things have changed for Jacksonville State. Brandon Owens says, not a question, but is Jacksonville State in basketball mode? Yes, we're done talking about the Gamecocks because you're done this year for the FCS. But are you done for the FCS for good? Boys, breaking news from the official sources out there. It looks like the CUSA is about to rebrand and invite Sam Houston and Jacksonville State up to the FBS level, along with Liberty, Gross, and I think New Mexico State was the other one. So that is just insane news that the FCS possibly next year, because of transitional years, will not have Sam Houston, Jacksonville State in the headlines, or James Madison. That is complete insanity. You guys want to make Brandon feel better about this? Because he's not happy about it, I know.
Yeah, I'll start. The good news for Brandon, the media will stop propping up JSU to be some title contender. So that's amazing. You'll never have a shot at the title again being FBS. But no, Brandon, I think you need to be happy. Overall, this is a cool thing. I would love to be in Jacksonville State shoes right now. So be happy. Yes, you will have to leave the ASUN podcast that you and Will are doing a great job with. But in the conference, on paper, looks like a dumpster fire. But overall, I would take this move any day of the week. Be happy, Brandon. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, the Sunbelt also was a dumpster fire for years, right? Remember? Oh, Sunbelt, blah, blah, blah. So it'll be interesting to see what it looks like for Jacksonville State. But enjoy basketball for them because football is done, but enjoy the FBS rumors, man. That's going to be cool. So Joshua Hoffman, Mr. South Dakota State fan, how big is the circle of suck in the Missouri Valley? Boy, it's not big, Josh. I got to tell you that, my man, because we just talked about 6 teams that could be competing for the playoffs. Your Indiana State down, Western Illinois, Illinois State, UND, Youngstown, all having rough years. So about half the conference is in that pretty brutal, not having a good year range. So, or did I miss?
Yeah, I would say I was going to say just circle those southeastern states: Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. If you play in there, you suck.
Okay, yeah. So you got the South, and yep, the northern teams doing okay. So, Peter Huggan wants to know: is there any chance College Game Day this week comes for the marker game? Unfortunately not, Peter. Looks like it's been officially announced, and it's Cincinnati. Is that correct, gents? Where they're heading? Looks like they're going to head to watch the Bearcats. Yep. Number 2. There, make you feel a little bit better, Brandon Owens. Who would ever thought Cincinnati would be ranked this high and then now in the Big 12, a Power 5 conference? It's all about a stepping stone, folks. All about a stepping stone to get your foot in the door. So, unfortunately, no college game day this week. Maybe for Montana State is things like see Sam Herder and others keep promoting. So, all right, guys, last quick hit question. Brandon Anderson wants to know pumpkin spice, yay or nay? Jamie, are you a pumpkin spice guy here as we enter Thanksgiving time
He
frame?
looks like it.
Yeah, totally.
Big time, absolute nay. Disgusting.
Jamie,
I like lots of other foods, as y'all can tell, but not pumpkin spice.
Jamie, would you say pumpkin spice is good, or would you say that it stinks?
Oh, it definitely stinks. Definitely stinks. I haven't thrown one of those in there. Got to make Will side. Pumpkin spice definitely stinks almost as much as Richmond.
Oh, there we go. Kylor, pumpkin spice guy, yay or nay from Mr. Anderson?
I mean, I'm not gonna be this burly, manly man. I'll take any white girl flavor. I mean, give it all to me. They taste delicious. I don't care. I'll admit it.
Oh, that's too good. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the pumpkin spice for taste, but that's shocking because I'm the one who prefers a margarita over liquor. My coffee isn't even coffee because there's like whipped cream and creamer in it. I mean, everything. The most unmanly diet of all time. So
Hey,
yeah.
if Tom Brady can wear Uggs, Kylor can drink pumpkin spice lattes.
I would agree. I would
I
agree.
won't order
That
one.
can happen when you have $50 million in your bank account.
Hey, you know what? Yeah, all right.
The goat has spoken. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for those quick hit question, guys. Thanks so much for the main ones. That takes everybody through. We got through everybody this week, which is great. Shout out to all of you. We look forward to more questions as the weeks continue. But our final one for us three here is our game of the week.
This is the matchup you should be paying attention to. This is the FCS Fans Nation Game of the Week.
All right, guys, game of the week. Bunnies, Bison, the Dakota Marker, which was a bunch of rocks that separated the states along the borderline. Here we go. Number 2, 8-0 North Dakota State, traveling down to Brookings, South Dakota to take on number 9, 6-2 South Dakota State, a rivalry that seems to have huge implications every year. Will South Dakota State be a seed? Will they be playing in round 1? Will North Dakota State be top 2? Will they be a 4-8 seed? What does this do for Valley, Southern Illinois, rankings, everybody else in the FCS? This is huge, gentlemen. I will say nothing, as I'm going to join Jack Rabbit Illustrated to give my prediction. Make sure that you subscribe to Jack Rabbit Illustrated on all the podcast forums, the Splitting Hairs podcast. They're part of our FCS Fans Nation network here on YouTube. So for you two gentlemen, looking a little bit at our standings for Pick'em for the year, Kylor, you're at 7-3, myself 5-5, Jamie at 4-6. Last week I gained a little edge in you guys with picking Northern Iowa. So, all right, Jamie, kick it off, my man. Your thoughts on the marker game? Who is the victor and a score?
Wow, you're going to promote somebody else's podcast and not even pick it on your own. Good grief.
You got to tune in to hear the unbiased Bison admin talk about this big matchup.
That's right. You know, a couple weeks ago, I was pretty locked in that South Dakota State was looking to run the table. As the injuries caught up with them, and I still thought so because North Dakota State's offense wasn't doing anything. They put a little spark in. Cam Miller, I think it's a really, really intriguing game. But I'm just going to why bet against the Bison? North Dakota State wins 23-21 in a close one. Matt Ince is probably going to make a ballsy call towards the end of the game that's going to work.
Maybe a 4th and 1 again. We'll have to see how it plays out. Taking the herd is Jamie Williams. Kylor, the Bunnies going to defend that marker title and get themselves back in seeding position?
I mean, if you really want me to talk about the second best game of the week, I can. You know, number 4 versus number 5 is definitely a better option. You know, together their rank is what South Dakota State is. What a bum program. So I'm just saying, obviously the unbiased Bison is pretty damn biased. No, I think Matt's been too
lack of research would be better.
Yeah.
Qualified.
Yeah, I think so. But, you know, I'll go with it. Matt's been tooting the horn that no other defense in the history of the FCS has been playing the same way that North Dakota State has this year. I don't think that's going to change when they're playing South Dakota State, who overall has not looked as dominant as they did versus Colorado State, which we all know. Jamie, will you say it right now? Colorado State
stinks.
Thank you. a little bit of a pause there. But yeah, I think it's NDSU's game. I don't see how South Dakota State is going to beat them, especially with all the injuries. I don't see it. Give me North Dakota State 21, South Dakota State 10.
Ooh, really low scoring. So we'll have to see how it plays down out there with the Dakota Marker. Listen to the Splitting Hairs podcast to get my prediction. All right, gentlemen, we have hit that time where our podcast ends for the week. FCS Fans Nation, thank you so much for submitting all these questions. Guys, make sure that you like and subscribe to this podcast. Drop us a rating, whether it's on YouTube or other platforms. Make sure to follow our social media pages, as is always said at the end. That's where you can get the most fan engagement for some of the game day threads that Jamie puts out there, the pick'em challenges that Kylor Neal runs. I'm going to be running our playoff challenge, and you can win a free team hat. And of course, start to look into those Frisco plans, guys, because we're going to be down there. The Rev has talked about bringing a trailer for us. We're thinking about having quite a big party. So make sure that you subscribe and check everything out. And with that, guys, we will enter the final 3 weeks of play before we get the FCS playoffs. Very exciting. I hope everybody's Halloween was great. I hope you best wishes and health to everybody's families as we continue into November and the cold falls upon us as we're going down to that final field of 24. Thank you so much for listening to the FCS Fans Nation podcast, everybody. Have a great night, morning, evening. Catch you next time. Boom.
Thank you for listening to the FCS Fans Nation podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your preferred listening platform, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google, or even YouTube. And make sure to follow our FCS Fans Nation social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you for listening to the premier podcast for FCS football. Boom.
Wait, I don't even know what I'm supposed to say. Oh, okay, I got it. Here we go.